Hi there, this is a piece of audio content that is only available in full over at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. We wanted to give you a little bit of a preview to show you what you might be missing out on. You can join us for as little as $1 under the pay what you want model at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits and get access to over dozens of hours of content, including every episode of For the Kids, a PBS Kids podcast. We appreciate you listening, whether you're a patron or whether you're listening on the free feed. You're under no obligation to join, and thank you very much for checking out this preview. But if you'd like to know what these episodes and extra content sounds like, here's a little bit of a sneak peek.
Before we get into kind of the eras of Arthur, just for context, and I want to hear about kind of your background in animation as well and kind of what makes you well equipped to discuss this, but we ask every guest this, kind of what is your experience with Arthur? What is your history with Arthur going into this conversation?
Well, what I appreciate about the Elwood City Limits and what you guys do is you're kind of chronicling the fever dream that was the 90s to early 2000s cartoon animation television, and it kind of Arthur has just always been a thing on my perimeter. Like I watched The Simpsons, I watched SpongeBob, I watched Dexter's Laboratory, I watched Powerpuff Girls, but Arthur was just always this thing that just kind of gave me like this hurt feeling every time I watched it. Like it was almost like it stunned when I saw it, and it wasn't anything about the show I particularly disliked, but just something about it was it just hurt to, like, I don't know if it was when it was on TV and it was just certain periods of my life, but like I had a hard time just digesting Arthur. Like I can't say I probably the most I've ever enjoyed it is watching it for this discussion we're having today, which was a pleasant experience because it was I could revisit it. But back in the day, for whatever reason, for my kid tastes, which are very similar to my current tastes, minus plus some things, it did not register too much. So it was good to kind of take this cold hard, like we're about to talk about, this cold hard look at the animation of the different eras of Arthur. But it's like, as I was taking a cold hard look, Arthur's warmth resonated underneath the metallic gaze to decipher the animation of the different eras.
The truly ageless quality of a cartoon like Arthur means that you can come to it at any time in your life and get something out of it. And speaking of time in your life, I also wanted to ask as well, Josh. We've talked about how you're obviously we know you as a multifaceted artist of I'd like to think several disciplines, especially having seen your work before. There's a lot of different things that go into the things that you make. Can you let everybody know, like, what is your background both in animation and just generally in terms of creating art?
Well, it's been a lifetime evolution, and I'll try to spare the boring details, but it's what I've boiled it down to. What I believe I do is I call it the smoothie business, because I make short film, animation, movies, all of those things, just kind of whatever word you want to pick. Smoothie kind of encompasses short film animation, which takes me to the next layer where I say filmmaking is all the genres, all the disciplines combined. Like if you film a painting on the wall, the painting's in the movie. So technically painting is a part of filmmaking, and it literally is because of sets and all that. So that's just one example. So with my short film movie stuff, they incorporate animation / increasingly have become all animation. So it's like, to me, if I am making a film, there might be some animation in it. What is the animation, you ask? It could be footage of something that is being moved around on the screen as keyframes. So it's like smoothie is my word to describe all that, and the smoothie business is kind of my colloquial term that I am trying to create as the umbrella for what I do. But to answer your question of the different disciplines, it's writing, illustration, animation, and sound design, I would say, are my 4 artistic things. So Arthur incorporates all of those.
Absolutely. And you were a natural pick to go on this journey that we wanted to do for finally putting our money where our mouth is to a certain degree, because we really, in these cases, we need a set of eyes that is not as Arthur pilled as Lucas and I have been for the past near decade.
Because that's a thing where it's like I salute the ECL you two for being able to make it through all of that, because it's a fever dream. Arthur is a fever dream, and it's not just about Arthur, it's about all these characters, and and they have nightmares constantly. Like, we keep seeing different dream worlds from the different characters' perspectives, and as we'll see in one of the eras, that incorporates multiple types of animation. And in the later eras, or the modern eras, there's less types of animation.
Well, that's, I think, a really good segue. Well, and Josh, you've intuitively touched on something that me and Will talk about all the time, which is the Arthur dream sequences, it's been one of our favorite aspects of the show, because it's really where they get creative, both in the animation and in the writing. You know, there's many classic ones that me and Will could gesture towards, you know, Binky being digested by a clam, and the long arm of the law arresting Arthur and literally grabbing him from his bedroom and pulling him into jail. There's these sequences that really stick in your head. But you touched on something, and I think this is because we said we were going to go in reverse. We have a couple episodes here representing different eras of Arthur, sort of little touch points throughout the long storied history, where, you know, there's there's eras, and, you know, me and Will have kind of colloquially been referring to, you know, the first 3 seasons as the golden era, and then later on when they're in Flash as the Flash era. So we're kind of going to go in reverse here, starting with the most recent era, where we're past the Flash era. Josh, you might be surprised to learn that this is a program called Toon Boom.
Right,
Is that correct, Will? This is the Toon Boom era?
Right. So, yeah, as you say, in reverse order, here's where we're starting. This is the most recent. This type of animation program and style is used in even animation projects that have come out in the year we're recording this, 2024, specifically for YouTube. So this is its fourth of 4 eras so far. This is a domestic production in Canada. Oasis Animation is the studio name, and it uses a program called Toon Boom Harmony, which when I was doing research for the beginning of this era, it's like, you know, it's touted as being used in big productions to small productions, so like Disney movies to television cartoons like Arthur. So this is the newest one that we have, and the one that they still seem to be using today.
Yeah, and like it's interesting. I wasn't sure, and I don't mean to insult you guys, but I wasn't sure if you regarded the change from Flash to a different program. I thought Flash was just the term you used for what you clearly could indicate was not the hand-drawn animation. So it's like it's good that I didn't realize that they did make a literal switch from Flash to Toon Boom, because I'm not aware of the Arthur production history per se, but I did go through the credits. I saw of the 4 episodes included, the most modern one had the credits, and the first one had the credits. So I actually wrote down to compare kind of what some very stark key differences are. And a big thing that I didn't mention earlier was I was entirely self-educated doing this stuff. I actually never worked at an animation studio, and technically I didn't go to school for animation, even though I went to the same school as Lucas did, Nova Scotia Community College for Screen Arts. Lucas went to radio and television, and it's like animation.
Will did it. Sorry, Will did as well. That's where
you did.
Will
you did radio and television. Yes,
I did. Yeah, yes. I was the year ahead of Lucas.
So it's like with Toon Boom Animation, that program, the only time I've interfaced with it was when I was trying to get a job at an animation studio, and I did a test for hiring, and I had to download the toonboom.exe, and they hot patched me some license code for like 4 days or something to do the test, which was pretty cool. And it's like, I'll say this, and I only used it for this test, and I never gravitated back towards it. I actually, in fact, still use Adobe Flash. It's called Adobe Animate now. I should say I still use Macromedia Flash. It's now called Adobe Animate now. And before that, it was Shockwave, whatever. My point is, somebody might get upset about hearing this, and we could break down the differences between the programs, maybe, but it's like, Toon Boom is effectively Flash as far as it just has more processing power. You can do more sophisticated effects. Flash breaks when you import images and other PNGs and stuff. It really is not meant to be a multimedia editor. It's strictly to do your vector animation, your frames. That's the frames noise, like your frame, different picture. It's like you got to get your frames in. Or you could do, and we'll talk about this, what you can do a lot of are motion tweens, where you can make a image motion to another part, another keyframe, and the tween is the in-between. So you can make that in-between time really long, or you can make it really short. So it's like you can make the thing move around in differing speeds. And then on the motion tween, at the end of the motion tween, you can change out that frame to another image, and then the motion tween can continue with a different image. And it's, nobody will ever notice.
Well, and me and Will are giggling because for anyone who follows you on Twitter, Josh, we see day in, day out, though you might not be an animator in the same way that people who work at these studios might be, you are no stranger to the motion tween, and much of your day
and the
is thinking about and the keyframe, right? The two distinct things: the motion tween and the keyframe.
Yeah,
the yin and the yang.
And there's keyframes involved in the motion tween. I don't mean to cut you off, Lucas. It's just like for the purposes of our discussion, because maybe somebody might have a hard time following this. I consider the keyframe like there's a new image, so it's like. You see an image, and then maybe 2/20ths or 2/2 of a second or whatever, a new image shows up. So that's the keyframe. Whereas the motion tween is we see one image and it moves like an arm swinging from one section to the other. But then at the end of that swing, it might swap out for a slightly different image, and that is technically a keyframe within the motion tween. But it's with the hand-drawn early era Arthur, it's very much new images the entire time. I can confirm.
And so this is something that's really interesting to talk with you about, Josh, because the brain recognizes things even if it doesn't have the words to put it, to understand what's going on. And me and Will have kind of between us described it as somewhat of for these modern episodes, specifically the late Flash and Toon Boom era. And like you said, they're kind of interchangeable.
But it's good to make that distinction. That is an important distinction to make.
Mm-hmm. Well, just talking about Toon Boom right now, and then maybe we can move on to Flash in a moment, but we always describe it as, me and Will, the paper doll effect. In that, at some point, something changed with Arthur where these characters were imbued with life, they kind of lived and breathed, and then at some point they kind of resembled kind of a paper marionette doll where you could see there was a character and it's like, okay, I could see that they are able to articulate their limbs and move the character around, but it's less like my brain is being tricked and seeing that there's a living thing there, and it's more that, someone's moving around a puppet. And you've just kind of described, the process of what's going into moving that puppet.
And it is very much, we are seeing something that is the same, like our eye is looking at something the same that is moving, and then there is, just to simplify it, the keyframe. It's like, this is a new image, and animation, it might not be flagrantly apparent at first, because it's like, as especially in the early era Arthur, it's so well done, and the character designs are exquisite in such a sense that it enables the hand-drawn animation to flourish. And it's kind of like, I'll let you kick off the eras, but it's like that is, like you say, the imbued with life versus the paper doll effect. And I don't think I'm here to judge or criticize. like I said, cold hard look at the animation.
In this fourth era here, which was from 2016 to 2022, we assigned an episode to each of them, so we all watched the same episode. In this one, we watched Arthur Takes a Stand, which is the episode with Congressman John Lewis. It's one of the most famous episodes of this period, and so you would imagine that this is kind of the animation at when the most eyes are on it, in a sense. I'll kind of just give my I'll say layman's thought, and then we can kind of contrast that with a little bit more of an expert opinion, because going back to all of these and specifically looking at the animations sort of back to back in each of them was really interesting. So I really, and especially this is the era we're still covering. Like I do really appreciate just about the makeup of what's on screen. I always appreciate how colorful it is, and how, especially compared to the third era, which is the Flash era, the character models feel a lot more expressive. And yes, while we still get that sort of somewhat jerky movement between with motion tweens, as we've talked about, I think in this final era there is a little bit more potential for these smaller moments that add to a little bit more personality, versus in the Flash era where we'll get into it, but like there are like little moments in this episode that we watch where, like, when Mrs. McGrady sits down and she kind of does a little bit of a sigh, and it feels a little bit more naturally animated, or like a little expression where after Buster chugs the syrup and he kind of does a little bit of like the hands to the heavens, and it's not meant to be like a big move strictly from one pose to the next pose. It's just a little bit of a more subtle movement, or at least that's what it looked like to me in watching this again.
Lucas, did you want to say anything, or you want me to?
No, yeah, I basically, I'll kind of defer to you, Josh, in terms of, taking it one era at a time. Arthur Takes a Stand, kind of what was your takeaways? Strictly the animation. I mean, as much as we don't have all day, as much as I would love to hear your thoughts on Congressman John Lewis,
I will
we only have time for one show.
Yeah, I will say this. I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. Writing wise, like, I didn't know about the celebrity guest appearance, because Arthur does have some notable appearances throughout its history. But it's like, I thought the episode writing wise was quite solid, and out of the modern era of this and the next era's episode, I will say this stood quite tall on the Arthur Takes a Stand motif here of the discussion. I think it stood quite tall writing wise, and animation wise, I noted the intro animation that was included off the YouTube thing I watched. We should be transparent to the viewers. I did not go directly to PBS and see the tapes. I was watching off streaming, so I can only decipher so much of the animation. But fortunately, it was an official source, so I could see the modern era's opening, and it was. I want to say, I wrote down mimicry. Like it felt like it was very much taking it, or quite literally taking its cues from the original, quite well iconic, beloved opening of Arthur. So it was interesting to watch this modernification of these. What we're going to talk a lot about is poses, because essentially that's what Arthur is. And unlike a lot of television shows, especially children's animations, all the Arthur's characters are of a human anatomy. They're all children or adults. They have legs, and what is good about Arthur is, outside of the human-esque characters, there's a lot of creatures, and like Pal, that's his name, right? The dog.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like they have Pal. So there's quite a diversity among the Arthur characters, which I think is one of its strengths. But it's like that's a real telltale sign of what we mentioned earlier, the lifeless versus life of you see this human anatomy, and when you see it in different positions than either just standing there or just sitting there. If you want an example of this, the animation Family Guy, you see the characters either standing in a place or they're sitting in a place. It's like these characters are and for all intents and purposes, Arthur 2018 and Family Guy, I'll just say same thing. Like same thing in terms of what they're doing, like animation wise. There's a lot of, I'm sure, quite a different production on both sides, but it's like, if you just want where my mind is at with this anime, because that's what it reminded me of seeing it. Because it's so this opening, watching these 90s created poses, like you see them on the swing, you see the walking down the street, you see these differing positions, these different angles, some could say wacky. And it was watching that in the modern era, and then once the episode started, it's like, oh, I'm watching Habbo Hotel. This is Habbo. Okay, and it's like everything's isometric, which is like the angle iso. It's like, okay, yep, we're in the school. Understood. I see the entire school. I see the children walking around the school, and at first, it's like it fooled. I don't want to. I said mimicry. I don't want to say it fooled me, but I began to feel fooled as I went backwards through the eras, because it's like I'm watching this. It's like, it's Arthur. It's Arthur. I'm like happy. It's Arthur. And I'm like, and I remember the lunch lady character. I forget her character's name.
Mrs. McGrady, yeah.
I was like, I remember Miss McGrady. I'm like, it's like an episode about her. It's like, okay, this is okay. And then it's like, I don't remember Arthur being this feisty, and like Lucas said, we don't have all day, so I don't want to be too writing centric. But it was just kind of like I got dunked back into Arthur, back into the and it's like the 2018 period. It was interesting. Okay, this is a school episode, and it's like, so getting past the intro and seeing, it's like, okay, Habbo Hotel, the school, they're walking, and it's like everybody's walking around. It's like the part of it I think is impressive, and part of why it quote unquote gets away with doing what it does comparatively to the hand-drawn animation of the 1990s. It's like you see their full bodies doing things. So that's the part I tip my hat off animator wise, because a lot of stuff, if some of your listeners remember Legendary Frog on the internet animations of this is a pretty deep cut, but like a lot of animations you'll see the characters at the waist up a lot of the time. You don't necessarily see their feet. So it's like that part stuck out to me. It's like, okay, they're walking around, and then by the end of the episode, it's like, okay, the kids are really walking around. Like, it's like they're, I'm using my fingers. Okay, they're walking, and everything's this diagonal movement. So it's like we were talking about different images versus a static image the entire time. We have this static image with multiple limbs moving around, and I if I sound like a psychopath, kind of just taking Arthur into this context, that's what animation is, because it's like none of this stuff happens unless somebody sat there and made the pant leg do the thing when the voice clip ended at the 8.5 minute mark. And it's like, so it's like when I'm saying like the Habbo Hotel thing is like, oh, there's a lot of characters in this scene. That's interesting. Okay, like Family Guy, going back, like just to contrast the two. Yeah. It's like they're in their living room. There isn't like a big, it's not like the school all the time. It's like they're in their living room. It's a relatively condensed environment. So I'm just saying the pluses, because that part engrossed me to a degree. I'm like, okay, because I forgot Arthur's about all the characters, and I appreciated that all. And it's like that almost, it's like they have these characters and they deposit them in different environments. And this was a school-centric episode, so they're in the classroom, they're in the cafeteria, which is with the climax of the episode, and they're in the hallway, and it's like you see these characters walking around. They have their paper doll looping animation as they diagonally walk down the hallway, and it's like, well, I'm like, at least something's going on. Like, it's like, I'm like, at least they're making them walk around. I'm like, that's good.
I'm not going to be able to unsee the diagonal walking when we talk about season 25.
I wrote down Paper Mario. I wrote down Paper Mario. Okay. And Paper Mario, if you were to stack the two up, I think Paper Mario might be kind of like, don't, like, we're doing different stuff here.
I was just going to say, before we move on to Cadonia, you've, once again, Josh, very insightfully touched on something that me and Will have talked about, which is that, when we first started this show, I think the animation was, in addition to the writing and the characters, a big part of why we enjoyed it. And the strength of the writing and the strength of those characters, their designs, and how they work as an ensemble kind of sitcom cast is why we've almost finished the show. And I think there's other shows. Me and Will have, in Patreon episodes, have to watch other children's programming, and they don't have that writing, and they don't have those characters, but they have
that
the
animation.
Boom. They definitely don't have the animation. And we realize, if Arthur didn't have if the writing did not stay the same and the characters weren't as good, we would have quit long ago. So you've already, in watching 4 episodes, insightfully gleaned that. Did you have any other thoughts on Arthur Takes a Stand before we move on to Cadonia?
I just kind of like, we'll end our discussion on the modern era with Cadonia. I just want to Arthur Takes a Stand stands tall in the modern era because it felt like, or when I watched it, that the production team, the animators, the team that makes Arthur, everybody, it felt like they're aware we're nearing the end, and this is a big deal episode, and it's like I felt the energy of it, where it's like, okay, we're the lifeless dolls, because as it starkly contrasts when we go to the next era, Cadonia, it's like, okay, yeah, we're thoroughly in this. And I looked at the credits for this one too, and it's like we're thoroughly in this kind of like, Arthur's been around the block for a while now. We know what we're doing. This is a cool episode, and it's like, okay, this shit's happening with the animation, and it's like when I watch, and as we go into Cadonia into 2013. I was a little shocked at how sloppy it felt in some ways. And I got that right? Like Cadonia's or is it 2017?
Let's say that it's we have 2 ends of the 2010s. The final era is the end of the 2010s into the 2020s. At the beginning of the 2010s, the third animation era before this one, is one that we've talked about, and one that we have had perhaps some controversial thoughts depending on who you ask. So yes, the episode we were talking about here is Cadonia. This era of Arthur animation was from 2011 to 2016.
It aired 2013. I just looked it up. Cadonia aired in 2013.
Thank you very much.
That's super important to me, because I think one of the elements of the animation discussion is this animation was made by a team of people during a certain time frame, and in my animation expert opinion, I really see the circumstances and context of these years bleeding in.
Sure.
But I'm not pointing at necessarily specific events or political things. I'm just purely looking from a heart and feel standpoint. So it's like, when we went from Arthur Takes a Stand to like the tail end, like 2018, and now we're in 2013.
Yes,
I was a little shocked, and Will, I just, my animation take on Cadonia. Maybe you can give your opinions on the episode, but it's like I was a little shocked. Let's just put it that way. I felt
okay.
I was like, okay, yeah, no, I see. I just watched one of the better ones, because Cadonia, it's like, it just felt very stiff in a different way. It felt like the people working on it weren't having as much fun. And it's like, however, compared to the tail end of the modern era versus the beginning 2010s, there was more hand-drawn artwork present within the 2013 one, whereas the 2018 one, there is little to no hand-drawn artwork, period. And in Cadonia, the hand-drawn artwork I am discussing is the kid illustrated, like story-wise kid illustrated artwork, most notably the Cadonia flag, but also there's some portraits in the background. It's like that early 2010s edge, like, I'm sure there's video game listeners of this podcast. You remember Watch Dogs came out 2013. There's edge going on back then. Like it was, and it's like, I definitely notice. And I don't want to generalize or anything like that, but like the 2018s is like, okay, we all got a pretty good job here. This is like a good episode of Arthur. The writing's on point. We're gonna the corporate. I don't even want to say corporate, but like kind of the architecture of the creation of Arthur was well into place it feels like, in 2018. Whereas 2013, I wonder if there is some turnover or there is some let's just keep it like it's something was so like it's like because like and I was like, you know, this is like the second like Arthur starts a cult. It's like, how many times does he do this? Is this and as when we talk about the bonus at the very end of the episode, it's like I didn't know Arthur did this. Like I thought Arthur was like he's like chaotic. Like he's not even chaotic neutral. He's like just like chaotic. Like he's but it's like so I when I was watching it, I was like the 2013 Edge, like that's the best way I can put it. It's like the kids, it's like, okay, we're in the tree house. I wrote down like, did they make the tree house for this episode? Like, of course not. That was just like, actually, no, it's a question for you guys. Was the tree house in place since the very start?
Yeah, that's
yeah.
The treehouse
like
is
so when
Arthur standby. The treehouse is like an Arthur motif.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
He's had
So
it from the jump.
So this is this semi segues. Let's just stay in Kidonia for a little bit here. But like when they're in, this is a very good example of we'll just keep note of this for later. It's like we're talking about the Habbo Hotel effect of like these big rooms and the characters are like deposited within these rooms and you're seeing this isometric angle of these characters. One of the words that kept coming up was like non-angle. That for me, like it's like this is not this is a non-angle because the character and I don't want to say I'm guilty of this, but like I proclivitate to like the Powerpuff Girls, Fairly Odd Parents school of thought where the character can be front facing. It's cool. It's like, you know, Family Guy, going back to Family Guy, the characters are very Paper Mario front facing to you the majority of the time. But Arthur, why this effect might not be as desirable is one of the things that really stood out about that show is these are very human characters. You see them from different angles constantly. So it's like in this modern era, it's like they basically made different Arthurs being all the characters, but different Arthurs with a S.
Yeah.
Of every 25%, we might see a new image. And it's like one of the examples in the between the two ends of the modern era is in Arthur Takes a Stand. Somebody looks at their watch and it's like I'm looking at like a web page, like, and that's not even like a compliment. It's like it's almost too flat. It's like I'm looking at, oh, this is a picture of an arm. This is the arm, and it's like not
right. And
then Kidonia, there's a similar perspective shot, and I made a lot of categories here, but we don't need to get into all of them. But like different perspective shot. And it felt a little more, you know, like 2013, like, like this, whatever that is, and your viewers can decide whether or not that exists. Maybe I just make that up. We were all alive in 2013. We can either confirm or deny, but it's like that flatness. It's like the Habbo Hotel effect, specifically for the treehouse. It was like, we're just, because this became apparent when I watched the earlier episodes, that treehouse, for all intents and purposes, it might as well be the cafeteria. It might as well be like purely space wise. It's like, and one of the things that like I think sums up the entire modern era is like the Kidonia flag. As I noted earlier, there's hand drawn artwork on that flag. And it's like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. I don't think that would be allowed in 2018. Let me just put it that way. I think that like somewhere they'd go, like let's just use let's just use Arthur's face. Like let's just put Arthur's face on there. Like, oh no, the flag's too much. The flag's too much. But what really stood out is and we can go to the next episode pretty soon. This flag, we do not see it wave. Let me just say that. From an animation standpoint, because one of the categories I have is like, okay, we should probably say this, it's like one of the very simplest way to look at animation is there's characters, so those are the things that walk around, move, talk, whatever, and then there's environments where those characters are, and sometimes you can have shots that's only the environment, sometimes you can have shot that's only the character, but contingent of those things is the camera angle. So is it a wide shot? Is it a close-up? Is it a high angle lens? Is it a low angle lens? And it's like, as we see when we go backwards through Arthur, there's a lot more of those low angle, high angle, like it's like where I noticed that this modern era, it's cut, and there's a lot of camera moves, so it's like it will quote unquote zoom out, and it's like we're not seeing new images, but it's like making the effect of movement through seeing these front facing diagonally walking characters. As it pan means horizontal movement, tilt means vertical movement, and it's like whether or not the animators decide to showcase the different altitudes and angles, it's like it's easier. Oh, they're just sitting there on the couch. Like it's like that nobody's doing anything wacky. As you'll see in earlier episodes, they do a lot of wacky stuff, and there's different. And the term I'll use, and I hope this isn't too lewd or whatever, but it's like compromising angles. And it's like I say that because if you were to film somebody, and for all intents and purposes animation is basically you're filming somebody, but you got to draw or do whatever to make every image. It's like if you were to film somebody like in the first episode, DW Snowball, it's like they're in the fridge. It's like you see them from the ankles up or whatever. And it's not like a bad angle or anything, but that takes work to show that. Like that's a lot more difficult to do that in a way that's not off-putting or awkward. So it's just easier to have them walking around. A great example of this is, and we can wrap on Kidonia, it's like at the end of the episode, after Kidonia has failed, the mother, Arthur's mom, says DW is now head of security of our country, and DW says that he needs to be Q-raid, R-raid, like it's like not just X-raid, he has to be Q-raid, W-raid, and Arthur goes, oh, or whatever, and you see Arthur diagonally walk into, he walks to the right, keyframe, end of the motion tween. I'm oversimplifying it. It's a lot harder to do this than I say, just to say, but it's like keyframe. Now we see the Arthur going to the left. So he does the Habbo Hotel walk into the room, and it's no different than the walk in the school. And I think if he's about to get Q-raid, he should be walking different. That's how that's the storytelling, and that's the pose. And it's like other animations aren't under this much scrutiny because they don't have human designs. These characters do have human anatomies, so we pick up on this non-lifelike thing. Whereas Kirby doesn't have to worry about this. However, Kirby takes a lot of animation too, the video game character Kirby.
Okay, that's going to do it for now, but we will see you next time on Elwood City Limits or at patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits if you decide to join us. Thank you very much, and have a great week.